The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest structure ever built in known space. It floated in orbit above a dead gray world called Palaxis, a planet chosen specifically because no one wanted it. The hall was shaped like a ring, with 42 platforms arranged in a circle, each one belonging to a different alien civilization. In the center of that ring, standing on a small raised stage under the light of 1,000 floating orbs, was a single human woman. Her name was Una Park. She was Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, and right now, every eye in the chamber was fixed on her. The year was 2387. Humanity had been traveling between stars for less than 200 years, which made them practically newborns by galactic standards. The Valith Dominion, the reptilian empire that controlled most of the eastern spiral arm, had been sailing through space for 11,000 years. The Pelori Collective had been around even longer. To these ancient civilizations, humans were children, loud, fast-growing, and dangerously unpredictable children, and that was exactly the problem. The session had been called by the Velith Dominion. Their lead delegate, a tall creature covered in dark green scales and dressed in ceremonial armor, had spoken for nearly an hour. His voice had echoed through the hall like a slow drumbeat. He talked about peace. He talked about stability. He talked about the natural order of the galaxy and how every species must learn its place. And then he got to the point. Humanity's warships, he said, were a threat to galactic civilization. He showed data, charts, fleet sizes, acceleration curves, kill ratios from the handful of skirmishes humanity had been involved in over the past 50 years. The numbers were not in humanity's favor, or rather, they were too much in humanity's favor. Human warships were fast, brutal, and terrifyingly efficient. In a simulated engagement run by the Council's own military analysts, a human battle group of 30 ships had been projected to defeat a combined Velith and Pelori fleet 3 times its size. The chamber had gone very quiet after that. Now it was Una's turn to speak. She stood straight, her hands folded behind her back, and she spoke in a calm and steady voice. She said that Earth's fleet was purely defensive. She said humanity had never started a war in space. She pointed out that humans had actually helped defend 2 smaller civilizations from pirate fleets, and had asked for nothing in return. She reminded the Council that the right to self-defense was written into the founding charter of the Galactic Council itself. It did not matter. The vote was 38-4. Resolution 7716 passed with an overwhelming majority. From that moment, humanity was banned from building, owning, operating, or deploying any vessel classified as a warship. All existing warships were to be completely taken apart within 1 galactic cycle, which was roughly 14 Earth months. Any violation would be treated as an act of war against the entire Council. Una stood perfectly still as the votes were counted. She did not argue. She did not shout. She simply bowed her head slightly and said, "Earth acknowledges the resolution." Then she turned and walked off the stage. In the corridors outside the assembly hall, she passed groups of alien delegates. Some looked at her with pity. A few looked smug. The Velith delegates did not even look at her at all. She kept walking until she reached the human wing of the station, stepped into her private office, sealed the door, and let out a long, slow breath. Then she opened a secure communication channel. On the other side of the galaxy, in the coastal city of Busan on Earth, Fleet Admiral Taeho Kwan sat in a dark room and watched the vote happen in real time. The room was deep underground, inside the headquarters of Unified Earth Command. Screens covered every wall, showing news feeds, fleet positions, and intelligence reports from across human space. Taeho was a broad-shouldered man in his early 60s, with gray hair cut short and a face that looked like it had been carved out of stone. He had served in the fleet for 38 years. He had commanded ships. He had fought battles. He had buried friends. He watched the final vote tally appear on screen, and he said nothing. Around him, his staff waited. Some of them were angry. A young officer near the back of the room muttered something about the council being cowards. Another officer slammed a hand on a desk. But Taiho just sat there, quiet as a rock in a river, letting the current of emotion flow around him without touching him. After a long silence, he stood up. "Get me the directors of every black site research division," he said, "tonight." His aide blinked. "Sir, some of those programs are not supposed to exist." "I know," Taiho said. "That's the point." 3 hours later, Yuna's face appeared on his private screen. She looked tired, but composed. She told him what he already knew, that the council believed they had solved the human problem, that the Velith were already celebrating, that the smaller races were too afraid to speak up, and the ones that had voted with humanity had done so knowing they would lose. "They think they've pulled our teeth," Yuna said. Taiho leaned back in his chair. The light from the screen cast deep shadows across his face. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he spoke, and his voice was low and flat, like a door closing. "Let them think that." Yuna studied his face through the screen. She had known Taiho for 20 years. She had seen him angry. She had seen him grieving. And she had seen him calm. This was something different. This was the look of a man who had already made a decision so big and so quiet that the rest of the galaxy would not hear it coming until it was far too late. "What are you planning?" she asked. Taiho reached forward and ended the call without answering. That night, in a dozen hidden facilities scattered across Earth, the Moon, Mars, and places that did not officially exist, encrypted messages arrived on secure terminals. They all said the same thing, a single word, followed by a single authorization code. The word was, begin. 18 months after the vote, every human warship was gone. The galaxy watched it happen. News drones from a dozen alien networks hovered around the Luna shipyards as the great vessels were cut apart. The UES Incheon, a heavy cruiser that had once chased a pirate fleet across 3 systems in 9 days, was sliced into sections by its own maintenance robots. The UES Halasan, a dreadnought so large it had its own weather system inside its forward hangar, was stripped down to its skeleton and fed into recycling furnaces. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, humanity's fleet was turned into scrap metal. The footage played on repeat across Council space. Alien commentators discussed it, with tones ranging from relief to open mockery. On the Velith Dominion's state broadcast, an anchor called it the end of human arrogance. At a diplomatic reception on Palaxis Station, the Velith ambassador raised a glass and made a toast to what he called a species that has finally learned obedience. Yuna Park was at that reception. She smiled politely, said nothing, and drank water instead of wine. Deep in the outer edge of Earth's solar system, far past the orbit of Neptune, hidden inside the cold and silent Oort cloud, there was a station that did not appear on any map. It had no name on any official record. The people who worked there called it Jindo, after a small island off the southern coast of Korea, a place known for a sea that splits open once a year to reveal a hidden path. The woman in charge of Station Jindo was Dr. Hana Shin. Hana was 41 years old. She had short black hair, thin hands, and the kind of quiet voice that made people lean in to listen. She had designed 3 classes of warship for the old fleet before she turned 35. She understood how ships were built, how they fought, and how they died. And now she had been given a task that was unlike anything she had ever attempted. The task was called Project Dokebi. The name came from an old Korean legend about goblins, strange creatures that could appear as anything they wanted, that could be helpful or terrifying, and that were never quite what they seemed. Hana's job was to build something that was not a warship, something that could pass every inspection, satisfy every regulation, and comply with every word of Resolution 7716. Something that was, on paper, completely peaceful, and something that could destroy a battle fleet. She did not work alone. Taeho had given her permission to recruit anyone she needed, from anywhere in human space, with no questions asked. Her team grew quickly. Captain Jisoo Baek was one of the first to arrive. She had commanded a destroyer in the old fleet, a fast and aggressive ship that had earned a reputation for appearing where the enemy least expected it. When the fleet was decommissioned, Jisoo had been offered a desk job in logistics. She had refused, and for 6 months she had done nothing but sit in her apartment and stare at walls. When Hana contacted her with a vague offer and a set of coordinates, Jisoo packed a bag and left within the hour. Minho Ryu came next. He was 26, young enough that some of the senior staff looked at him sideways. But Hana had read his work, and she knew what he could do. Minho specialized in artificial intelligence and autonomous systems. He could make machines think, and more importantly, he could make machines cooperate. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, all working together like a single mind. Then came Yoonji Cho, a quantum physicist who had been working at a university on Mars. Yoonji was quiet, a little strange, and had a habit of solving problems that her colleagues had declared impossible. She arrived at Jindo, looked around the station and said, "This is either the most brilliant thing anyone has ever done, or the most stupid. I'm interested either way." For 2 years, they worked. The station hummed with activity at all hours. Engineers argued over designs. Physicists ran simulations that made their computers overheat. Jisoo trained combat scenarios, using nothing but mining equipment and construction drones, pushing them to do things they were never designed to do, and finding that they could do those things terrifyingly well. The concept at the heart of Project Dokkaebi was simple in theory and insanely complex in practice. Humanity would build arcs, enormous modular ships designed for deep space colonization, mining, and humanitarian operations. Every system on board would be civilian-grade and fully legal. Mining lasers, construction drones, gravitational tethers for capturing asteroids, medical bays, agricultural modules, colony prefabrication units. But every single one of those systems had a second function. The mining lasers could cut through warship armor as easily as they cut through rock. The construction drones could be reprogrammed into attack swarms in under a minute. The gravitational tethers, designed to gently pull asteroids into orbit, could also grab an enemy ship and tear it in half. The medical bays doubled as damage control centers. The colony prefab units could be ejected and reconfigured into orbital defense platforms. Nothing on the ship was a weapon. Everything on the ship could become one. Hana presented the final design to Taeho during a secure call. She walked him through every system, every module, every hidden capability. When she was finished, Taeho asked a single question. If the council sends an inspection team, what will they find? Hana looked at the blueprints on her screen. She had spent 2 years of her life on this. She had barely slept. She had missed birthdays, holidays, and the funeral of an old friend. She had poured everything she had into this project, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that it was going to work. They'll find a hospital ship, a mining platform, and a colony transport. They just happen to be the same ship. Taeho was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "How soon can you build the first one?" "Give me 8 months. You have 6. Hana nodded. She ended the call, turned to her team, and got back to work. Somewhere out in the galaxy, the Velith were still laughing. They would not be laughing for much longer. The UES Baekdu launched on a bright Tuesday morning from the Luna shipyards, and the whole galaxy was watching. It was enormous, nearly 4 kilometers long, with a wide central body and 6 modular arms that extended outward like the branches of a great tree. Its hull was painted in the standard white and blue of Earth's civilian fleet, with the words United Earth Ship, Colony Vessel, printed along the side in 3 galactic languages. It moved slowly away from the moon, its engines glowing a steady blue, and it looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. A big, peaceful ship carrying people and supplies to build a new home on a distant world. Jisoo Beck stood on the bridge and watched the stars ahead. She wore a simple gray uniform, with no rank markings, no medals, no insignia of any military branch. On paper, she was not a military officer. She was the civilian captain of a colony transport. She had practiced saying that sentence in the mirror until it sounded natural. The Baekdu's mission was public and well documented. It was heading to an unclaimed star system called Gumho to establish humanity's newest colony. The ship carried 12,000 colonists in cryosleep, along with enough equipment and supplies to build a functioning settlement from nothing. It also carried a full complement of mining drones, construction platforms, survey equipment, and a medical facility large enough to serve a small city. What it did not carry, according to every official record, was a single weapon. The Galactic Council had sent an inspection team. This was expected. Taeho and Hana had planned for it. The team arrived aboard a sleek Velith shuttle that docked with the Baekdu 2 days into the voyage. It was led by a Velith delegate named Vriss, a tall and thin reptilian with pale yellow scales and small, careful eyes that missed nothing. Vriss had a reputation for being thorough. He had once spent 6 days inspecting a Pelori trading vessel and found 17 regulatory violations hidden inside a sewage recycling unit. He was not someone who could be easily fooled. The inspection lasted 3 days. Vriss and his team went through every deck, every compartment, every storage bay. They scanned the mining lasers and confirmed they were standard civilian models, properly licensed and within legal power limits. They examined the construction drones and found that each one was registered as a non-combat autonomous unit. They checked the gravitational tethers and verified that they were calibrated for asteroid capture operations. They inspected the colony prefab modules, the agricultural bays, the water recycling systems, the medical equipment. They ran software audits on every computer system on the ship. They found nothing. Jisoo walked with Vriss during the final day of the inspection. She answered every question calmly and politely. She showed him the colonist cryo chambers and explained the settlement plan for Gimho. She introduced him to the ship's chief medical officer, a friendly man named Sun Ho Yoon, who gave Vriss a tour of the hospital wing and talked enthusiastically about the new surgical equipment they were carrying. Vriss said very little. He walked with his hands clasped behind his back, and his small eyes moved constantly, looking at everything. When they reached the observation deck at the end of the tour, he stopped and stared at Jisoo for a long time. "This ship is very large for a colony mission," he said. "We're building an entire city from scratch," Jisoo replied. "We need a lot of equipment. Your mining lasers are unusually powerful. We'll be cutting through dense rock on an unprocessed world. Standard lasers would take 3 times as long." Vriss made a sound that could have been agreement or suspicion. Then he turned and walked back to his shuttle without another word. His official report was filed that evening. It read, "Inspection complete. No violations of Resolution 7716 found. Vessel classified as Deep Space Colony Transport. No further action required." Jisoo read the report on her personal screen, alone in her quarters. She let out a breath she had been holding for 3 days. Then she locked her door, opened a secure channel, and spoke 2 words. "We're clear." 12 hours later, in the dead of the ship's night cycle, when the inspection shuttle was long gone and the colonists were sleeping in their frozen chambers, Jisoo gave an order that was not recorded in any log. "Begin conversion drill. Full combat configuration. Clock is running." The Baekdu came alive in a way it had never shown its visitors. Deep inside the ship, systems that had been sleeping woke up. The 6 modular arms shifted and locked into new positions. Mining laser arrays rotated on their mounts and aligned into broadside firing lines. Construction drones poured out of their bays and formed into tight attack formations. Their simple construction tools replaced by cutting beams and magnetic grapples. The colony prefab modules detached from the hull and reconfigured into armored drone platforms. The gravitational tethers powered up to full strength, reaching out into empty space with invisible fingers strong enough to grab a warship and crush it. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That was how long it took, from peaceful colony ship to something that looked like a nightmare made of metal and light. Jisoo stood on the bridge and watched the readouts scroll past. Every system green, every drone in position, every laser aimed and ready. Minho, who was monitoring the drone network from the operations center 1 deck below, leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. He had built the software that controlled the swarm, but seeing it work at full scale was something else entirely. 2,000 drones, all moving as one, all thinking together, all ready to fight. He recorded the results and sent them back to Station Jindo on a tight beam encrypted channel. Hana's reply came back 20 minutes later. It was one line: build more. Over the next 2 years, humanity launched arc after arc. 12 at first, then 30, then 60, then 100. Each one left the shipyards looking like a peaceful colony vessel. Each one passed every inspection. Each one carried colonists, miners, doctors, and engineers. And each one carried a sleeping wolf inside its bones, waiting for the moment it would be told to wake up. Jisoo stood on the observation deck of the Baekdu and watched the stars. Her first officer, Lieutenant Do-han Kang, stood beside her. He was a calm and steady man, who rarely spoke unless he had something worth saying. "Do you think the council will ever figure it out?" he asked. Jisoo looked out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, 100 ships just like hers were sailing through the black, all of them carrying the same secret, all of them waiting for the same signal. "By the time they do," she said quietly, "it won't matter." The Velith came without warning. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Helix Corridor, a stretch of space that contained 3 human colony worlds and roughly 4 million people. The fleet moved fast and hit hard. The colony world of Daegu 7 was the first to fall. Its orbital defense satellites, the few that were allowed under Resolution 7716, were destroyed in the opening minutes. Ground communications were jammed. Supply ships were seized. Within 6 hours, Velith soldiers were on the surface, and the human governor was broadcasting a surrender under the barrel of an alien weapon. 2 more colonies fell in the days that followed. The Velith fleet swept through the corridor like a wave, brushing aside the handful of civilian ships that tried to flee. A passenger liner carrying 3,000 people was stopped and boarded. A small mining vessel that refused to cut its engines was destroyed with a single shot. The Velith broadcast their victory to the entire galaxy. Their fleet commander, a decorated officer with dark red scales and a voice like grinding stone, appeared on every news channel. "Humanity has no fleet," he said. "They cannot fight. They cannot resist. These worlds and their resources now belong to the Velith Dominion, as is our right as a sovereign galactic power." The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Una Park stood before the assembly once again and demanded action. She reminded the council that the Velith had just invaded sovereign human territory. She reminded them that this was a clear violation of galactic law. She asked for a joint response, a peacekeeping force, sanctions, anything. The chamber was quiet. The Pelori delegate looked at the floor. The smaller races stared at their hands. A few delegates made brief statements expressing concern and calling for dialogue. The Velith delegate sat with his arms folded and said nothing at all. No one voted for intervention. No one offered help. Humanity was alone. Yuna walked out of the assembly hall for what she believed would be the last time. She did not look back. On Earth, the news hit like a physical blow. Cities went quiet. People stood in the streets, watching screens mounted on buildings, watching footage of Velith warships humming in orbit over human cities. Fear spread fast. Anger spread faster. In Busan, a crowd gathered outside the gates of Unified Earth Command, shouting and demanding to know what the government was going to do. Inside the underground command center, Taeho Kwan stood in front of a room full of officers and officials. The screens behind him showed real-time data from the Helix corridor. Red dots marked Velith positions. Blue dots marked human colony worlds. 3 of those blue dots were now surrounded by red. Taeho looked at the room. Everyone was looking at him. Some were afraid. Some were furious. Some were both. He let the silence hold for a moment, and then he spoke. His voice was calm. Not the calm of a man who did not care, but the calm of a man who had already decided exactly what he was going to do. 4 years ago, he said, the galaxy told us to give up our warships. We did. We followed their law. We broke down every ship we had, and we did it where everyone could see. The galaxy watched us do it, and they thought we were finished. He paused. They were wrong. He turned to his aide. Activate Protocol Dakibi. The aide hesitated for just a moment. Then she entered the authorization codes. Across human space, 147 ARCs received a single encrypted transmission at the exact same moment. It arrived on secure channels that were buried so deep inside the ship's communication systems that no external scan could ever find them. The message was short. A code phrase, an authorization key, and a single command. Convert. On the bridge of the Baekdu, which was docked at a refueling station near the Gumho colony, Jisoo Baek read the message. She had been waiting for this. Part of her had hoped it would never come. A larger part of her had known it would. She stood up from their chair. All hands, she said over the ship-wide channel. This is the captain. Protocol Dakebi is active. Begin full conversion. This is not a drill. The Baekdu began to change. The lights dimmed as power was rerouted. The modular arms locked into combat positions. Drone bays opened, and swarm units launched in disciplined waves. Mining lasers swung into broadside alignment. The gravitational tethers powered up with a deep hum that vibrated through the hull like a heartbeat. Across the galaxy, the same thing was happening on 146 other ships. Colony transports became carrier platforms. Mining vessels became battle cruisers. Hospital ships became electronic warfare hubs, bristling with jamming equipment and sensor arrays. Ships that had never fired a shot in anger revealed what they had been carrying inside them all along. A fleet that had not existed 12 hours ago was now the largest concentration of military firepower in the quadrant. On Palaxis Station, Yuna Park sent a final message to the Galactic Council. She recorded it in her quarters, sitting at a simple desk with nothing behind her but a plain wall and the flag of United Earth. Her voice was steady and her eyes were clear. 4 years ago, you passed Resolution 7716. You told us we were a threat to peace, and you took away our ability to defend ourselves. Today, the Velith Dominion has invaded our territory, seized our colonies, and taken our people hostage, and you did nothing. She paused. So we will do something. You banned our warships. You said nothing about our cargo ships. On the bridge of the Baekdu, now redesignated as the flagship of the United Earth Arc Armada, Fleet Commander Jisoo Baek opened a communication channel to the Velith fleet holding position over Daegu 7. A Velith officer appeared on screen. He looked at Jisoo with open amusement. A colony ship captain, he said. You wish to surrender? That would be wise. Jisoo looked at him with an expression that held no amusement at all. This is Fleet Commander Bake of the United Earth Ark Armada. You are occupying sovereign human territory. You have one chance to withdraw. The Velith officer laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. You have no fleet, human. You have cargo ships and mining tools. Do not embarrass yourself. Jisoo reached forward and cut the channel. She looked at Dohan, who stood beside her at the tactical station. He gave her a small nod. Jisoo turned to face the main view screen. 147 converted arcs were forming up behind the Baekdu. Their drone swarms deployed, their weapons hot, their systems locked on to 200 Velith warships that had no idea what was about to hit them. She gave a single order. The first 60 seconds of the Battle of the Helix Corridor were the most violent 60 seconds in recorded galactic history. The Velith fleet had been positioned in a standard defensive formation around Daegu 7, their ships arranged in layered rings with the heaviest warships in the center and lighter escorts on the outside. It was a formation designed to fight other warships, to trade broadsides, absorb damage, and grind the enemy down through weight of fire. It was a good formation. It had worked for the Velith for thousands of years. It was completely useless against what the humans brought. The first thing the Velith saw was the drones. Thousands of them. They came in a wave so thick that Velith sensors could not count them all. Each drone was small, no bigger than a ground vehicle, but they moved together with a coordination that was almost beautiful. They twisted and turned around each other, splitting into smaller groups, merging back together, flowing like water through the gaps in the Velith formation. The Velith point defense guns opened fire, and they hit some of the drones, but for every one they destroyed, 10 more slipped through. The drones attached themselves to Velith hulls like insects. Their cutting beams, originally designed to slice through asteroid rock for mining operations, went to work on warship armor. They targeted sensor arrays, communication dishes, engine housings, and weapon mounts. Within minutes, a third of the Velith escort ships were blind, deaf, and unable to shoot. Then the arcs opened fire. Mining lasers were not elegant weapons. They were not designed to be. They were built to cut through the hardest materials in the universe: dense asteroid cores, compressed metallic ice, raw planetary crust. When those same beams hit Velith warship armor, the armor did not stand a chance. It melted, it burned, it peeled away in sheets of glowing slag. Entire sections of Velith ships were cut open like paper. The Velith tried to fight back. They were experienced warriors, and they were not cowards. Their warships turned and brought their heavy guns to bear on the arcs. They scored hits. They burned through hull plating and damaged systems. But the arcs were not like normal warships. They were modular. When a section was damaged, it was simply detached from the main body, and the ship kept fighting. When a drone swarm took losses, the surviving drones reorganized instantly, filling gaps and adapting their tactics in real time. The arcs shifted their configurations mid-battle, rearranging their own structures to present smaller targets or concentrate their firepower. The Velith had never seen anything like it. No one had. The Velith fleet commander ordered his heavy cruisers to charge forward in a wedge formation, hoping to punch through the human line with brute force. The cruisers accelerated hard, their engines blazing, their forward guns firing. They made it halfway before the tethers caught them. Invisible beams of gravitational force locked onto the leading cruiser and held it in place. The ship's engines roared at full power, but it could not move. Then a second tether grabbed its stern. The two forces pulled in opposite directions. The cruiser's hull groaned, then screamed, then broke apart like a toy being pulled in half by a child. The other cruisers tried to turn. The tethers caught them too. 9 hours after Jisoo gave the order, it was over. 163 Velith warships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 37 had surrendered or fled. The 4 million people on Daegu 7, who had spent days living under Velith occupation, looked up at the sky and saw human ships where alien ones had been. Human losses were 4 arcs damaged, none destroyed. On Station Jindo, far away in the Oort cloud, Unji Cho sat at her monitoring station and reviewed the battle data. She ran the numbers 3 times to make sure she was reading them correctly. Then she leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. The arcs had performed at roughly 40% of their theoretical maximum capability. They had not needed to use the gravitational singularity projectors, the experimental weapons that Hana had designed as an absolute last resort, weapons that could, in theory, create a temporary micro-black hole at a targeted point in space. Weapons that Hana had called the thing no one should ever have to see. They had won without using them. They had won easily. Unji picked up her cup of cold tea, took a sip, and said to no one in particular, "That's terrifying." The Galactic Council session that followed was the most chaotic in its history. Delegates shouted at each other. The Velith representative demanded that humanity be expelled from the council and declared a rogue state. Several other delegates demanded the same. But the math had changed. Humanity had just destroyed a Velith fleet with mining equipment. The threat was no longer theoretical, and for the first time, humanity was not alone. 9 civilizations, the small ones, the young ones, the ones that had been pushed around and ignored by the elder races for centuries, stood with Earth. Their delegates rose from their platforms and crossed the chamber floor to stand beside Yuna Park. It was not a military alliance. It was something simpler and more powerful. It was a statement: we are done being afraid. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. You told us we could not build warships, so we did not build warships. Everything we used in the Helix corridor was a mining tool, a medical system, or a construction platform. You wrote the law. We followed it to the letter. If you find that frightening, perhaps you should ask yourselves a question. Why were you so eager to leave us defenseless in the first place? The chamber was silent for a long time. Then the vote was called. Resolution 7716 was repealed. It passed unanimously. Not a single delegate voted against it, not even the Velith. In Busan, Taeho Kwan watched the vote from his underground command center. Hana Shin stood beside him. She had flown in from Jindo that morning, the first time she had been on Earth in nearly 4 years. She looked thin and tired, but her eyes were bright. "So," she said, "what happens now?" Taeho watched the screen as the council chamber emptied. Alien delegates filed out in silence. The Velith platform was dark and abandoned. He thought about the fleet he had built in secret. He thought about the years of work, the risk, the deception, and the terrible gamble that had paid off. "Now they know," he said quietly, "and they will never forget." 3 months later, at a diplomatic reception on Palaxis Station, a young alien diplomat approached Yuna Park. He was from a minor species, one of the 9 that had stood with humanity during the vote. He was nervous, fidgeting with his drink, and he spoke in a low voice as if he were afraid someone might hear. "Ambassador Park," he said, "I must ask. The reports from the battle say your arcs were only fighting at partial power. Is that true?" Yuna looked at him. She was holding a glass of water. She took a slow sip. The young diplomat waited. "You should hope," she said, with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes, "that you never find out." She walked away and left him standing there, alone with his drink and a silence that felt much heavier than it should have. Somewhere out in the dark between the stars, 147 arcs sailed onward through the black. They carried colonists, miners, doctors, and engineers. They built cities and planted crops and healed the sick. They looked like exactly what they were supposed to be, and the galaxy never made the mistake of testing them again.